fastest wrestling on the edge of the world!
Kia ora everyone and welcome to SPW Bleeding Edge, the podcast about wrestling on the edge of the world. I'm Tyler King, joined as always by David Dunn. David, hello.
Hello, Tyler. How are you doing this fine evening?
I am doing good, David. Excited to be here once again and excited to chat to our guest this time, the Hooligan
Lads,
Marcus
I'm
Kool.
here. Get on with it. How's it going?
All right, sweet. He's here already. Cool.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, well,
I'm drinking Pals. I'm ready to go. For those that don't know what Pals is, it's gin, Hawke's Bay lemon, cucumber, and soda.
great.
Yeah.
Well, it's episode 10. Time to throw that format out the window. Marcus Kool, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, lads. I'm very excited to be here. I think you've done a stellar job on this podcast so far. I've listened to every single one, and it's been great. You know I love you and David. However, the guests and the fact that not one of them has put me over yet really only means that I'm here to bury everybody else and put myself over.
We wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay, good, because that's all that's going to happen in this podcast.
Okay, great. Well, let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk a lot about Queenstown. Obviously, we've got WrestleFest coming up, and we know that you're very proud to be living in Queenstown, but of course you're not from Queenstown originally. You're from Birmingham, England, and it was your choice to come here to New Zealand and to Queenstown specifically. So can you tell us why? Why did you choose to come here and why did you choose to stay in Queenstown?
That is a good question, Tyler. I did the typical backpacker route. I left England, not really wanting to be in England anymore. Did a bit of traveling, and I ended up landing in Queenstown, and I kind of just fell in love with the place. I love outdoors. I love sports, and it has all of that. And it's beautiful. For those that have been here, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So it was kind of hard to leave, really, and I've just been here ever since.
It is a big move, though, traveling from England to New Zealand. You know, I've barely left my hometown, as it turns out. But you know, how do you go about packing up and moving your life, quite literally, to the other side of the world?
I suppose at the time, because I left home when I was quite young. I left when I just turned 18, really. So at the time, it didn't really feel like a big deal. You know, I suppose a lot of people at that age were going to university or other things of that nature and really just wanted to get out of home. And for me, it was moving to the other side of the world. But I didn't really think of it like that at the time. So it didn't really seem like such a big deal. For me, you know, being young and 18, I kind of just wanted to get out there and explore the world. I wasn't really planning on staying here and moving my life to the other side of the world. It just kind of happened that way.
And talking about wrestling, so you got into wrestling while you were over there in the UK, and you left a scene that ended up really blowing up while you were over here in New Zealand. Are there any regrets related to that move away from the UK wrestling scene?
Of course it blew up when I left. No regrets, no. Because at the time, I didn't really... It's not that I didn't want to wrestle. I just wanted to do a little bit more with my life at that stage. Because, I started when I was 14. So I started really young, and I'd already done quite a bit up until that point. And I, especially at that age as well of 18, wanting to go out and do other things and, experience life a little bit more. It's definitely not a regret, because I had some really good times in the UK and I learned from some really good people. And looking back, I don't think I really realized at the time how fortunate I was. It was great to see it blow up and see all the people that I came up with and worked with do really well and be successful, because they had worked really hard and they had been brought up in a scene that at the time really wasn't flash and really wasn't good. So for them to pull in that graft and be there in the worst of times and then be there at the top in the best of times was really cool to see from my end, especially, being over here and watching it all unfold from the other side of the world. It was pretty cool. And hey, we've not done such a bad job over here either.
So when you arrive in New Zealand, you start traveling around the country, you're doing these wrestling shows, but there comes a point where you and Troy, T-Rex, get your heads together and decide maybe it's time to open your own promotion, something a little closer to home for the two of you down in Southland, and SPW comes to be. Tell us a little bit about that discussion you and Troy had, that thought process, and leaping out and taking that risk of getting SPW up and going.
I will, David, right after I crack open this pals.
Perfect.
So Troy had been over in Canada training with Lance Storm, and I think he'd messaged me over Facebook because he had noticed that I was doing something relatively close to him in Queenstown. Again, very small at the time, and he was heading back to New Zealand and wanted to be involved in the scene over here. I told him that was a terrible idea and to stay in Canada and don't come back to New Zealand if you want to pursue wrestling. He clearly didn't listen to that, and he came back anyway. But we kept in touch. And as bad as a human being Troy is as well, we get on quite well in some respect, and we also gel quite well in what our thoughts are on wrestling and how it should be portrayed. And we both obviously were trained quite well and had a similar type of upbringing in terms of I suppose respect is the right word, and treating it like a business and treating it the way it should be treated, and not treating it as, a hobby and a laugh. And I think when we got together and had a good talk, we realised there was a huge opportunity to do something in the South Island, because back then there wasn't really anything at all, especially down in Otago and Southland. So, we were sick of travelling up, doing car journeys of 9 hours to go and work a show up in bloody Blenheim, whatever it was, in front of a crap audience. So we decided to do our own thing.
So you decide to do your own thing. The time comes for SPW's debut event, August 2015. And, I remember in sort of the 24 hours or so leading up to that, for a number of reasons, this show almost didn't wind up going ahead. So let's go ahead. Let's get it on the record right now. Tell us about some of those hassles, some of those problems that you encountered trying to get this show underway.
Well, the first thing I remember about that show was that we were in a bloody snowstorm, which is actually a bit of a trend really within SPW, isn't it? We always seem to have shows or things happen where there's a storm or flights are being cancelled or there's a pandemic, something's happening when our shows are going on. And I think that was the main thing I remember from that one, is that there was a snowstorm and we were having a ton of trouble with transport of rings and people getting to the show. So yeah, we really did kick it off in a positive way with that one. Very stressful, especially with it being our first one. But it all came through in the end, and people did come through in the end.
Following that, it was time for SPW to debut in Queenstown. But before we get to that, I want to backtrack a bit, because years before there was ever an SPW, you wrestled the aforementioned Slade Mercer in Queenstown in a boxing ring. Slade Mercer told us a wee bit about this on his episode of the podcast, so I want to hear it from you. How did all that come about?
Oh, God, you had to bring that one up, Tyler. I was just trying to expose wrestling in Queenstown and get some eyes on it, to get some traction and see if there was any interest there. A boxing event come along. It was like a big charity boxing event. You all guys know what I'm talking about. And I managed to get us like an exhibition wrestling match on there. So I give Max Damage, my best friend Slade Mercer, a call. And I say, mate, I've got us a gig in Queenstown. Come on down. We've got a singles match in a boxing ring. So Matt was stoked. He was excited. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. I made Matt, because at the time he wasn't doing Max Damage, and I really wanted him to have the face paint on. So I made him put the face paint on. So he wasn't too chuffed with that. However, we had a good time. It was received very well. It did put wrestling on the map a little bit in Queenstown, which definitely helped going forward. So it did what it needed to be done. And we got our own changing room that had WWF wrestlers on the door. So that was a win. And I think we got free booze too. So all in all, not a bad evening.
But that did lead to some momentum within Queenstown, and it wasn't long until you were running a full standalone SPW event in Queenstown at the Ice Arena, of all places, which was quite the building to take in. Talk to us a little bit about, I guess talk to us about the venue choice, because it's not every day you're seeing a pro wrestling show held in an ice skating rink. And then did you was there a pressure? Was there a real urge to deliver a solid home run performance there, being that this is your hometown? You are in the main event of this show. How, did you feel an extra need to deliver?
Okay, Ice Arena. I'll address that bit first. Yeah, I remember. I remember telling Troy and a few of the guys that I'd found a place, and it was the Ice Arena. And I remember knowing that these questions were going to come, but I just really wanted to just enjoy their questions before I answered them and reassure them that it wasn't on ice. But yeah, that was a fun time. They literally thought that I had organised a show with the wrestling ring in the middle of the ice rink. And I think at the time I'd also told Troy that, yeah, it'll totally work. Like, we can put padding down, around the ice and put some blue mats down and stuff and cover it. It's where the crowd can go. And I just remember him just staring at me, just disbelief. But yeah, at the time, the Ice Arena, it is located centrally in Queenstown. But at the time, they were doing renovations. So it was coming into summer. I think it was November, wasn't it? So it was coming into summer, and they'd completely, obviously got rid of the ice and defrosted it, and were looking for things to do in summertime. So it all kind of worked out. And it is a really cool venue, and it was very different. It was just really hard to run from a production standpoint. We pulled it off for what it was, and then obviously moved venues after that. But it was pretty cool and pretty special looking back on it, especially for a first one. And I just remember that crowd and that energy and that noise in the Ice Arena being pretty special and pretty cool. I think me and Troy did a segment at the start of the show, and it was just so loud. And people were banging chairs, and it just echoed all around there. So it was awesome, and it was obviously a great feeling for me, with it being the first kind of gig I'd done in Queenstown with a lot of friends there. In terms of pressure, no, not really. I was in there with Troy, and I always have lots of fun wrestling Troy, and it's always very easy. And because we knew, how loud the crowd was going to be, and I suppose how special the first one was, it was going to be just a lot of fun, regardless. And it was, it was pretty cool looking back on it. I think that's where we met Tyler as well. That was probably the one downfall of the show. That's where we met Tyler.
How'd the finish go for that main event?
What, the finish? I don't know what you're talking about.
It might have been a table involved.
Yeah, there was a table involved. We broke it. What you're saying?
Yeah. No, you did break it.
Did? Yeah.
Yeah. In the end,
I was so sure I was on point with that as well. Yeah, the vision that I had for that and what ended up happening was very different.
No shit.
Which is, I suppose we could say that for most things that I plan. And then Tyler has to edit it and sort it out.
Yeah, if you've only watched the on-demand, you've got no idea what we're talking about, so it's fine. So yeah, the Ice Arena got us off to a great start, and then the following year it was the Queenstown Memorial Centre that hosted SPW, and you had been looking forward to having a show there for a number of years. Tell us about that venue and what it meant to you to have SPW come to the Queenstown Memorial Centre.
That one meant a lot because, the Memorial Centre, I remember going to a few gigs there when I was, obviously being in Queenstown. And it is such a special venue, and it's centrally located. It's in the middle of the town centre. It looks great. It sounds great. And I always thought this would be an awesome spot for a wrestling show. Unfortunately, back then it was just a little bit out of our price range, But like anything, you've just got to take a gamble, and you've just got to go for it. And I think this year we decided to, and it paid off. And yeah, for anyone that's been to a show in Queenstown at the Memorial Centre, the Memorial Hall, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It's just a special type of atmosphere. It's so much different being in the ring too. And Dave will kind of, I suppose you've not really been in the ring there, eh, Tyler, to kind of receive it all. But it's quite crazy standing in the ring and looking out on it as well, because you don't really have, there's not four sides for you to look at. There's only really one side of the crowd to work. So just looking out at that craziness is it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can really feel that energy coming in from them, and they go wild for the Hooligan Marcus Kool. So you've got a pretty special connection with these Queenstown fans.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty lucky there. They like me for some reason.
Lord knows why, but they certainly do.
Thanks, David.
Hey, last year's WrestleFest, pretty special event in that ended up being televised nationally, TVNZ Duke in full card out there to the nation. How did that feel? That's got to feel good because, we've experienced this Queenstown crowd for a number of years now, and it, truly is special getting in the ring in Queenstown. And now to be able to put that out there to the rest of the country and say, hey, here's what's going on in Queenstown. Take a look. We'll think you enjoy it. How did that feel knowing that, this product that you've worked so hard on, this crowd that you've worked so hard to get in the building, you get to put it all out there, show it to the country?
Yeah, that one last year was pretty special. Yeah, that was really cool, and everyone really enjoys the Queenstown shows, and that's just not the crowd. Like that's all the guys as well, and I think everyone behind the scenes and everyone that puts so much effort and work into SPW, that don't tend to get a mention. Everyone really enjoys the Queenstown shows. So to kind of get that on TV, it comes across real strong, and you can tell that everybody's having a lot of fun, and I think that's what makes it quite special. And to get that on TV and and for the world to see was great. For me personally, like that one was pretty cool as well. Like we'll go on a bit of a downer, but we'll bring you back up. We're into the heat of the podcast, and we'll have a comeback for a finish. But I was actually going through a real shit time then, personally, and Queenstown for me is always a great distraction. And there's like a moment I remember really looking forward to it and putting all my effort and all my work into it, and really looking forward to the match with Bonza. And there's like a part in the match. I've never said this to anyone, but there's a part at the end of the match where like I win and it goes 1, 2, 3, and I'm like I'm just really gutted that I should be like celebrating because I won, but I'm actually quite gutted because it's over and now I have to like go back to normal because it was just such a special event and such a special show. And it was. Yeah, I don't know who captured it, but it was like a close-up of me, and I almost looked sad that I'd won. When I was just a little bit down because it was just such a special show, and it was a really enjoyable match as well. And I was like, oh, now we've got to go back to normal life, and especially then, right? I think we pretty much walked out of that show and went straight into a lockdown. So that was pretty crazy too.
Yeah, and I think like you say, it was not just the crowd. I think we talk about the crowd a lot for Queenstown, and rightfully so. They bring such an energy, but often overlooked is the actual quality of the in-ring content at these Queenstown shows. Obviously, the crowd helps with that. They feed into that, give you guys the energy to then give back to them. But it just means that every Queenstown show, top to bottom, is just so good.
Yeah, man, I agree. Like the crowd always helps for sure. Like they definitely make a huge difference. But it's almost like the guys, they're just so up for it, and they always deliver in Queenstown. Everybody always delivers there. I don't know. It's almost like being in another realm, isn't it? Just everybody just steps up the game and has a great time and has a great match. I think because they're all so excited, and you can just tell everybody's having fun, right?
It's almost like its own pocket universe within SPW, like the Queenstown. The Queenstown realm, like you say, like early on when you would be the most hated heel in Invercargill, and then literally the next night in Queenstown, you are the most beloved hero.
Yeah, it's definitely a different realm for sure.
And for a while there, we almost had an exclusive SPW roster of guys that would only do Queenstown shows. Like you had Kingy and Vinny and Slade and Jade come to mind, where like we would only ever see them at Queenstown.
Yeah, because that's all everybody wanted to come and do. Everybody was keen to come for Queenstown. They were suddenly available on those dates. Yeah, and I remember we had a lot of the Melbourne guys through for the Southern Rumble, and a lot of them were staying in Queenstown for a couple of nights either side. And just being in Queenstown and, hanging out there, they all were so excited to come and do a show there just so they could hang out there more. It's just a special place too. But yeah, the shows are just wild. I suppose one thing that's actually quite hard working Queenstown is because the crowd, as a performer and as a wrestler, I always have to listen to the crowd, and I'm always trying to feel them and see where they're at. And that really helps shape, your momentum and your timing and your pacing, and what's coming next and how you tell a story, right? But the problem with Queenstown is they're not like any other crowd in the fact that a lot of them aren't wrestling fans, and they're there just to have a good time and make some noise, which they do throughout the entire match. So as crazy as it sounds, it's actually quite difficult to work a match with the Queenstown crowd as well in terms of psychology and pacing, because there's no time for them to come down. They're always up. So you never have a down moment to then go, right, let's chill out a little bit here and bring them down so we can bring them back up again. It's a constant. So trying to feel that out and trying to weave that into whatever story you're trying to tell is actually really difficult too. And it's definitely a challenge that I have. With my character too, with the Hooligan, he's always very aggressive and always responds to loud noises and, aggression. And when the crowd are giving you that all the time, it's hard to actually settle and sell to then bring them back up, if that makes any sense. So although the Queenstown crowd are great, very hard wrestling crowd if you actually want to tell a good story that makes sense.
Yeah, not an enviable position. Much rather you than I there. Hey, taking an opportunity here to pivot from talking about the Queenstown fans to talking specifically about the fans of the SPW Bleeding Edge podcast. We put the call out on our social media asking for fan questions. And thank you very much to everyone who sent those in. I can tell from that exacerbated tone that you're very excited about these. So we're going to throw out some fan questions. So let's start with...
Can I guess what they are?
You can guess what they are, in fact.
What's your favourite match? Who's your favourite guy to be in the ring with?
We have had a lot of fans ask about your favourite match. So I guess let's open with that, shall we? Seeing as you called it. Marcus Kool, what is your favourite match?
Are we talking the match that I've been in or a match that I like to watch?
Let's go for both. Let's start with a match that you've been in.
Dirtbag done. Okay. Well, it's only because it came up over the past couple of days. That one's an easy one. My favourite match of all time is Stone Cold Steve Austin beat Bret the Hitman Hart in a submission match at WrestleMania 13?
Correct. WrestleMania 13.
Yeah. That is my favourite match of all time. In terms of, at the time as a kid, I loved Bret the Hitman Hart. Stone Cold Steve Austin was on the rise, and I was definitely, you're at that teenage stage where you're starting to turn a little bit. You're starting to get that attitude, and Austin was all over that. And for the story they told and how they did it and how it stacks up today, mind blowing. Yeah, definitely my favourite match of all time, hands down.
And then in terms of matches that you yourself have had, matches that you have wrestled, Marcus Kool, what is your favourite match?
Against Professor Palmer at Battle Lines.
And why?
Because I got to beat up Professor Palmer.
Because we redid the Stone Cold Steve Austin referee spot.
Shut up, Tyler. Well, no, that is true. Yeah, it's because I just got to do Stone Cold Steve Austin v Vince McMahon. So I lived that in my childhood.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
If I could change it up a wee bit, what's your favourite match you've ever had outside of SPW?
The only one that springs to mind is, and I think this is purely because I was a kid and there's no footage of it whatsoever. It's probably the worst match you've ever seen. But at the time as a kid, I remember thinking that was amazing. I wrestled a match against, at the time, Doug Basham. They were the Basham brothers in the WWE way back when. Nobody will know who they are now. But anyway, he had just left the WWE, and I got to wrestle him in England. And I think I was 17. So I hadn't been wrestling too long. And Doug Basham he just wanted to call the whole match out there from start to finish. And I'd never done that before. I just remember it. I remember being super nervous as a 17-year-old kid, being like, oh my God, I've got to go out there and wrestle this WWE wrestler who's like, jacked and 6 foot, whatever. And I'm this skinny 17-year-old kid, and he wants to call everything on the fly. I remember being super nervous, but I remember us having this it was probably awful, but I remember it being really great and the crowd being really into it, and everything flowed really well. And afterwards, he was super stoked with it and was blown away that I was only 17. So for those reasons, I think just because of purely memories and purely nostalgia and being a 17-year-old kid, that's one that always springs to mind. And because there's no footage of it, so I can't watch it back and realize how awful it was. But there's so many different reasons as to why you like or dislike a certain match, especially and as a performer, I always like watching my matches back a lot and getting other people to watch them back and giving me advice and feedback, because it's the best way you're going to learn and get better. I hate it when people say, "Oh, I don't watch my match back. I don't want to see how bad I was," or I can't do that. It's like, well, how are you going to get better and how are you going to learn and adapt and improve your game if you're not watching what you're doing? It just doesn't make sense to me. I like to scrutinize everything I'm doing and how I can improve and do better on the next time. And if there's certain things that I'm doing right, which is rarely, then I know that I can keep that in there as well, and I know that works. Or it might not work next time. I might have to change it for a different crowd or a different opponent. But if you're not studying what you're doing, stupid. I don't understand it whatsoever.
So staying back in that era of early on in your career, there's a question here from uni_dadnz. Where did the inspiration for your name come from?
Oh God. Okay. So Marcus Kool, unfortunately, when I was 14, I also was. This is going to surprise a lot of people with me being now the Hooligan, but I was very good. No, very good's the wrong word. I was good at break dancing. I used to break dance and do classes and stuff, and I could do a few moves. So obviously, being back then, I needed a character and something to kind of do that set me apart and do differently. So everyone was like, you should be the cool guy that does all the breakdancing. So of course, being a 14-year-old kid, I came up with Marcus Kool with a capital K because that's even cooler. And then kind of stuck with that one. And then I used it for so long that I didn't really want to change it. And I just thought, oh, well, Kool with a K can also just be it's just a surname. Like, looking back, I probably would have changed it when I changed my character and presentation to the Hooligan. But unfortunately, I stuck with it. So now I'm Hooligan Marcus Kool, where I probably would have gone Hooligan something instead.
And so from there, how did Marcus Kool become the Hooligan?
Hooligan came about because I was in New Zealand, and of course, I'm an Englishman. And everybody wants to do, if you're in another country, you should do an English character or a foreign character. And I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to just do the cliche. So as everyone knows, I'm a big football fan. I play football. However, I can't stand going along to football games and dealing with the loudmouth, drunk, annoying hooligans that are just there to cause trouble and sing songs and start a fight. I just can't stand them. I'm like, what are you even here for? Go to the pub, mate. Fuck off. So I leveraged that, and I thought, right, I will morph myself into one of those people and then try and times it by 10 to really portray that I am this hooligan person. So I studied a lot of those fans, and I watched a lot of hooligan films. And then I came up with the Hooligan character, which kind of morphed quite well with me being a football player and a football fan anyway. There you go.
This one more of a statement than a question, I guess, but we'll say it all the same. Come and face Davis Storm for the EPW Coastal Championship. Now, obviously, a bit of an issue with the borders and international travel at the moment, but is that a prospect that interests you?
I thought I heard something slightly different within that question there, but yes, that is a prospect that interests me 100%. I'm a huge fan of Davis Storm. Really big fan of his work. I think he's done a lot for the Australia scene and a lot for Perth. And not just that, he's a great dude. Really good guy. I met him, was it last year? I don't even know anymore. Maybe a year or 2 years ago, after talking a lot with each other over social media. We met in person and we hit it off straight away. He's one of those guys I clicked with immediately. Ton of knowledge, ton of experience, and definitely someone I think I would gel really well with in the ring. I'd love to make that happen, for sure. That was probably an opportunity I had to bury him, and I didn't. I really put him over there. That was a mistake. Can we redo that question?
It's on the record now, mate. We can't edit this. We did speak about lockdown earlier and how it kicked in right after last year's Queenstown WrestleFest. You had quite a bit lined up over in Australia for last year that didn't get to happen, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I was pretty gutted about all that. Yeah, I had a stuff lined up with Melbourne City Wrestling with PWA, which I really enjoyed going to both of those companies. Red hot crowd as well, very similar to Queenstown in that respect, and Perth too, EPW in Perth. So maybe that could have happened with Davis Storm last year. But hoping that when the borders do reopen, those opportunities come again. I'd love to get over there a little bit more. There's a lot of people over there that I think I could do some good work with, have some good matches with, and having a lot of fun with the crowds over there. For some reason, again, probably similar to Queenstown, for some reason they like me in Australia, which is unusual.
Tell us that Trent Seven story from Melbourne.
Melbourne City Wrestling had a couple of shows on. Can't even remember when it was, but I was just over there anyway. I wasn't even on the show. I said to Mikey that I just wanted to come over and watch and check it out. And because I was kind of just over there for a bit of work and for a bit of holiday, and I wasn't. It sounds so stupid when I tell people this. I just wasn't really in the mood for wrestling then for some reason. So I kind of just wanted to go along to the shows and watch. And there was a meeting that happened at the start of the show, and you do your rounds sometimes at promotions, and you get people to stand up and say, "Hey, welcome, blah blah blah," from blah blah blah. And I was just there, just watching. And Mikey kind of introduced me to everybody and said, "Hey, this is Marcus over from SPW," and and Trent Seven, who I'd never met before, he shouted from the back. He was like, "Marcus Kool's here," in his thick Brummie accent, and everyone was like, "What?" and kind of looked over to him, and he was like, "I used to watch him when I was younger in Birmingham." When he was a kid, and I was like, "Huh?" Which was quite odd. So it turns out Trent Seven used to come along and watch me in shows in Digbeth in Birmingham back before he started training, and the only time we got to meet was in Melbourne, Australia. So that was quite funny, because I didn't know he used to come and watch me either. Like, I had no idea. And when he said that, I was like, "Is he taking the piss here?" And of course, I went over and had a chat with him afterwards.
He's like, "Remember that awesome match you had with Doug Basham?"
Well, he would have been at that one for sure, because that was at the Irish Digbeth Club. Amazing.
Yeah, incredible. You never know who's watching. Who in the crowd could grow up to become a huge star in wrestling? You had Ryder in the front row at Queenstown WrestleFest a few years back. Look at him now.
You did, yeah. It is really cool watching a lot of our guys who were in the crowd back then, and to how far they've come now. That's always really cool to see, and pretty awesome to be a part of.
Well, on that note, there's a question from a fan along those similar lines. Josh Shearer has asked, "How does it feel looking back now and seeing the progress of SPW over the years?"
I think what's really special and cool about it is originally it was just me and Troy, and then over time it's obviously grown into a lot more than that. And there's so many people involved now, and so many people that are passionate. You know, like you and David, for example. You put so much work and so much effort into SPW. You know, so much out of your own personal lives, and you kind of enjoy it and you love being a part of it. And not just you guys, but there's so many others, right, that aren't even on the show. It's kind of become like a kind of a big family atmosphere, and to see how that's grown, and how much people do behind the scenes, and how much effort people put into SPW in general, is pretty special and pretty cool to see. Yeah, that's probably the best feeling about it all, to be honest. It's just affected so many people's lives in, you know, in my case, a positive way, for you in David's a negative way. Okay, boys, it sounds like we're coming towards the end of this podcast, and as it's the 10th episode, and as you guys have put so much effort into this, I was actually going to turn the tables a little bit and kind of wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions. Is that all right? Am I allowed to do that on your podcast?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, let's wrap it up then. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. See you later.
No, go on. If you've put some thought into it, then let's
very
hear it.
interesting, shaking up the format.
Hey, that's what I do, right? I change things up, you know, always looking to innovate. Okay, here's my first question. So you guys have clearly been putting a lot of time into this podcast. You've done 10 episodes right now. For you, Tyler, I'm gonna throw this one to you first of all. What do you get out of this podcast? What have you enjoyed so far on this journey? What are some of your highlights?
I enjoy catching up with David and having a laugh. We certainly have a good time recording these. I have enjoyed just having to actually have a conversation with the people involved in SPW, because I'm so usually quite busy and have quite a bit to do on show days. I'm usually fly in for the show day, have the show, fly out, and I'm not much for, you know, having a drink and all that kind of stuff. When it gets loud and rowdy at the end, I disappear, because that's just who I am, and I like to have my quiet time. So I don't always get to catch up with people as much as I would like during show weekends. So that's been really good. Just to have a chat and get to know people better. That's
a good answer, Tyler. It's normally me and you just catching up in the morning for a flat white, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
What about you, David?
Yeah, obviously what Tyler's said, and that, you know, catching up with Tyler is great, but just in general, the opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff, because it's similar to my role as a commentator, I guess, or even my role as the ring announcer, and that, you know, I am just passionate about SPW, pro wrestling in general, but SPW specifically, and I just love chatting about it. And, you know, I live in Levin, New Zealand, which is a small town about an hour north of Wellington, so I don't have the opportunity much outside of this podcast to be able to sit down and talk about SPW and pro wrestling in the way that we've had over these past 10 episodes. So yeah, it has been great, you know, getting to know some members of the roster a little bit more. Sometimes you know an interesting story and you want to give them a chance to air that out and let everyone hear it. And sometimes you've got no idea what they're going to say when you're asking these questions, and you're learning about them at the same time that the listeners are. But yeah, it's been a great avenue to chat SPW, because I don't have that opportunity outside of this podcast.
Yeah, it's quite interesting hearing you guys say that, and it's quite weird. We've actually got a bit of a common bond there, right? Because all of us were from kind of different areas of New Zealand. We're not actually in the midst of it all. So we're kind of out of the loop a lot of the time. We're not, you know, like Tyler says, he kind of flies down for the show, does his thing, and kind of finishes up, and then he's out of there. And then, you know, you living where you live, Tyler, and me kind of living in Queenstown as well. It's rare that we get to catch up and really get involved in all and talk pro wrestling when that's quite weird, right? When it's something that we love so much and are so heavily involved in.
Yeah, it's not like we can just catch up at training every Wednesday, or, you know, a couple of times a week and go over stuff. So yeah, it's been really, really good, I think, for that reason.
Okay, and now I've got specific questions for you both. So I'll go to Tyler first. Tyler, for those that don't know, you do a lot of work for us, not, you know, with all types of things, but what I want to focus on and ask the question on is you do a lot of the the video editing, and you're responsible for a lot of our production and highlight videos and highlight packages and editing of the shows, which is a shit ton of work. Is there a particular match or moment or like a highlight video of a show or something that you're particularly proud of that you've done that stands out from the rest for a particular reason?
Yeah, what was it? The Deadly Sins Forever videos were probably some of if we are talking personal favorites, then that is some of my personal favorite stuff. There was actually, I think there was 2 parts. No, I always meant to do a 3rd part, but then I kind of realized, we've kind of done all we need to do, and it's kind of pretty much set to go after we'd done the 2 parts. But yeah, having that moment where J.K. Moody turned on Kane, won the belt, turned on Kane, and then using that footage to really make it a moment. And then with the follow-up interview, really establishing J.K. Moody as the star and Kane as the star on the other side, going after him was really cool and really fun challenge. And yeah, I guess the fact that it went from there and then up to them headlining the stadium show, with all of that material behind them and all of that build up behind them, it really feels like a kind of a historic New Zealand wrestling feud. I don't know if that's putting too much on us. Maybe a historic SPW feud, but certainly, yeah, really enjoyed doing all that stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think you're underdoing that there. I mean, it was a feud that ended up, in front of one of the biggest New Zealand crowds in, however long, right? That was a very good lead in there, Tyler, because, sorry, David, I am coming to you, but this is flowing well with the questions that I had. So, Tyler, you always seem, you've always got a really cool head, and I know you have your moments, and I have my moments, but you always seem to be very, level-headed and cool when it comes to showtime. However, when we did the Southern Rumble at the stadium, you must have been losing your mind, right? Like, we were running a stadium. We had however many cameramen that you had. You had a million things to do. I mean, talk us through that.
Well, each stadium show we've done, I've had different roles. So the first stadium show, I was ringside cameraman, as well as, organizing the rest of the camera crew, organizing the video production, everything like that. But then when it comes to showtime, I had someone else pushing the buttons, and I went and jumped on camera ringside. So at that point, you kind of can't really be stressed, because there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
It's all out of your hands. So I've just got to worry about getting my shots and just enjoy being ringside for this amazing show. So, and then, we discussed on the J.K. Moody episode, something went wrong on that show and I had to run away and fix it. But it's just something we can laugh about now. But yeah, and then the one we did in 2019, I was sitting at the desk, pushing the buttons, and yeah, probably more stressful, that one. Particularly when the first match started and we realized that we did not have the ring bell.
That is a vintage SPW mistake, that one.
It really is. A huge stadium show, going down the list, tick it off. We've got screen 1 working, screen 2 working, the giant screen above the rings working. Cool, this is working. Cool. Yeah, we missed the ring bell. So.
I mean, that is us, isn't it, really?
So yeah, I did. I don't know if I had a level head when I realized that was happening, but I went and found it and it was all good.
Excellent.
But no, super proud of what we accomplished doing those shows. It was unreal.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Okay, David.
Yes.
Leading into the question similar to the way I did with Tyler, but you've spent a lot of time with us from start to finish as a ring announcer and as a commentator. What would be some of your fondest moments or memories, either as a commentator or in the ring, that really stood out?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoy as a commentator, and I don't mean for this to come from a vain perspective at all, because it's not, but I love it when something I've said gets clipped up by Tyler and put into one of the show highlight packages, because it shows that you've been succinct enough, you've been accurate enough to summarize whatever's happening in a tiny soundbite that works to convey the overall story. So I'll always look back on the night that the Deadly Sins split up, and I'd summarized it as J.K. Moody, the new SPW champion, and a friendship blown to smithereens.
So
And
good.
that classic soundbite now in SPW history.
Yeah.
And that's just quite exciting to go, oh, in this moment, I've done my job. I've gone out there. I've done what I needed to do. And Tyler's thought I did a good enough job of it to clip that up and use that as a little bit of narration over his beautiful highlight video. And that tells the story to the general public. So that's very exciting when that happens. And then I love doing ring announcing. Obviously, like ILT Stadium was amazing. And anyone who was involved with it is going to say that that's one of their career highlights. As I sit here now in my room, I'm looking over at a framed photo from that first show that I know a few of us have in our houses.
I definitely have it in my room for sure.
Just a lovely memory, and it was just really cool. Being in the ring and looking out and seeing all these people, but knowing that they had come for our product. It would be one thing to be doing an arena show and you've been picked up by a different company or something, but this was thousands of people there to see SPW, this thing that we all started back in 2015. So that was really cool to be there in the ring and just I just tried to take a moment before the show and really soak that up and take notice of what we'd all accomplished there, because that was incredibly special.
Yeah. And then we forget that obviously for the guys that are performing in the ring, they're only out there for a short amount of time, but you're out there for the whole night. Is there any times that you get, obviously with the guys, we get nervous before we go out. How does that work for you? Is there ever a time that stands out that you've been nervous, or you're nervous more than other times, or is it very much before the show starts that happens and then you're kind of in the flow of things?
It's definitely before the show starts. I remember, for example, the morning of that first Southern Rumble at ILT Stadium, and we went out for breakfast with Reese Matthewson to discuss, how we were going to divvy up the roles and that. And I got scrambled eggs on toast, which is one of the most palatable things, super easy to eat. And I just felt so sick because I was so shaken up about, but we're going to leave this cafe and then we're going to the stadium and thousands of people are going to come and watch this show. And I was very nervous that morning. But it's usually the lead up to the event, and I've got to get in the ring before the show and sort of do that housekeeping side of things. And please don't get in the ring, and here's where the fire exits are, and here's how you can go and get merchandise. And we've got a raffle and those sorts of things. It's usually right up until then that I'm very, very nervous. And then you get in the ring and you rattle off your housekeeping, which is good because it's essentially a script, so you know what you've got to say. And then you've had your first exposure in front of the audience for the night, and you've had your first taste of getting in the ring, and it feels calmer at that point. You've settled in some more. So once the bell starts and it's actually showtime, I'm good. But in the sort of that hour from doors until just before the show is when I'm at my most nervous.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I suppose final question, is there, very similar to your favorite match here, but your guy's job as a commentator is to help tell the story that the guys are telling in the ring. Is there any match that stands out that you're particularly proud of that you thought you really contributed to in terms of helping tell the story, or some of your work that people should check out that you thought was a win?
It's a bit of a strange one, that, because it's sort of you as a commentator can't do an amazing job of telling the story without the help of the talent in the ring. Really, I love when people clue me in on sort of points to look out for. It's a collaborative effort, right? At the end of the day, so So I do enjoy, and I hate to give you a big head mark because Lord knows big enough as it is. But you
this
have
is
always
supposed to be
been
a podcast of me burying people, David.
I know,
and me
it's
putting
turned
myself
around.
over. And now it's turned to me being buried again.
Shaking up the format all over the place. But no, there's been some amazing matches you've had in Queenstown, and I think especially the one where you staked your career. It was SPW Championship versus your career, taking on Kane Khan, and just trying to summarize that story, trying to let everyone at home know truly what the stakes were for this matchup. And trying to, when there's something a little more than just the bell-to-bell action going on in the ring, I think those are the most interesting, most fun ones as a commentator, because you've got to work in this backstory, but also you can't be super heavy on backstory to the point where you're just talking facts and figures over the moves and the moments in the match. And I feel like, I haven't watched it back in a while. Maybe I'll go back and watch it and think that I was terrible. But at this time, to my memory, at least, that feels like a good combination of the action in ring, the story being told over our microphones, and just everything. It felt like there was a great synergy that night.
Yeah, no, I can agree with you on that one. I think I might have even messaged you about. I'll drop you a message here and there, right? And I think I messaged you about that one, saying you guys did a really good job of helping us tell that story on that one. Yeah, fond memories of that one for sure. And I remember the commentary being great. Okay, boys, on that, you've both done a stellar job here, lads. I can't knock you on this podcast. I have really enjoyed it, although people haven't put me over, yourselves included. I have really enjoyed every single episode, and I really hope you do another season. Have you guys, on a closing note, have you guys got anything to say to your guests that you've had on, and to the listeners that have listened, to close out the final episode of season 1 of the SPW Bleeding Edge?
Well, first and foremost, a massive thank you, right? I mean, obviously, a podcast is no good if it's going out dead air and no one's listening. So we truly mean it. Thank you to all of our listeners who have joined us over the past 10 episodes. Couldn't have done it without you, quite literally. And then the same to our guests, because, Tyler and I, we quite like each other and we're reasonably interesting guys, but I wouldn't want to listen to 10 episodes of us talking with no guests.
Yeah, like David said, a massive thank you to everyone that's listened and everyone that's interacted with us along the way. It's been very cool seeing all the comments come from different places. A lot of people listening on YouTube, as well as on Spotify and everything else. So it's been fun, and thank you for being on this ride with us. And it won't be the last you hear from us. Certainly, you'll hear us on SPW On Demand at Queenstown WrestleFest. And we will let you know as soon as we know about future episodes of The Bleeding Edge. Throwing it back to you, Marcus, because we do have Queenstown WrestleFest coming up. It's basically a week away. How excited are you to be back in Queenstown for SPW?
I'm very excited, Tyler. I cannot wait to get in the ring with Niwa and beat the shit out of him. I thought the match we had in Invercargill was extremely physical, was exactly what I needed. It woke me up a little bit, and I think it woke Niwa up too. I think he realised I was saying some things that kind of hit home a little bit, right? It kind of got him a little bit amped up, and I'm glad. So I think when Queenstown hits and we have that crowd and we have that electricity and we have my intensity and my fire, and Niwa brings his A game, like I know he's going to bring now, I think we're in for a whole different type of match than what we saw in Invercargill. No, very excited for Queenstown. If you haven't got your tickets yet, head to eventfinder.co.nz. They're on there. It's going to be a great show. It's Easter weekend. I'm very excited. I love Queenstown. I love the energy it brings. I love the crowd that it brings. If you've not been to a Queenstown show before, you're missing out. If you're a fan of New Zealand wrestling, if you're a fan of wrestling in general and you're living in New Zealand and you've not been to a Queenstown show, what are you doing? I'm serious too. Like, what are you doing? Buy some tickets. See you later.
Nothing more to be said, is there?
Tyler, David, thank you so much for bringing us 10 episodes of the SPW Bleeding Edge. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've done a stellar job, lads. For those that are listening, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed these two, giving you as much information and as much love and passion as they can for the SPW Bleeding Edge and SPW in general. Hey, hopefully we're back for season 2. This is my outro. I'm giving it a crack. It's totally ad-lib here. Check out us on iTunes and Spotify. Anywhere you get your podcasts, download it. It's a good time. All right. See you later. Cheers. Bye.